Hey friends, Cameron here from elementarygroovetracks.com, and our topic for today is I'm a real teacher too, and other things we shouldn't have to say. Now, the premise of this topic is that many times as elementary music teachers, we find ourselves saying things in our head that just shouldn't be the case, things we shouldn't have to say. The first one is, I'm a real teacher too. When we find ourselves saying this to ourselves, that usually means that either we're accepting some kind of treatment or some kind of circumstance that we shouldn't, or that we have a professional boundary that's being crossed. The important thing to do when we find ourselves in this kind of situation is to identify what we're accepting or tolerating that we shouldn't, or what boundaries being crossed, and then ask ourselves, what can I do about this? Now, another thing we might find ourselves asking is, or saying rather, is that yes, music does count for a grade. Many times this results from the fact that our students might not be aware of the fact that what they do in music class actually counts. And this is for several reasons. One might be that we simply haven't communicated that well enough. Another thing might be that when they receive their report cards, their music grade actually doesn't show up. And a third thing that could happen is that even though the grades might show up, the grading system might be set up in such a way that someone could be an exemplary student, and then there could be another student that just barely gets by and they get the same grade because of the way the grading scale is set up. Some things you can do about this is you can ask other teachers what they're doing and how they're grading their students and kind of get some feedback on that. You can talk to the administration, or you could talk to your district music specialist and see if there's something that you can do about the way the grades show up. Many times you might have to advocate to get your grading system to show up in a way that reflects student effort and student learning. Another thing that we sometimes find ourselves saying is, please don't consistently pull students from my class. Many times students that you teach have other things that they need to be pulled for. Perhaps it's a disciplinary thing. Many times it could be that student has to work with a certain specialist that comes in to help them with their specific problems. It's understandable if this happens every once in a while, but if it becomes a consistent thing, that affects your teaching of that student, and that affects that student's grade because they're not learning all the things they need to learn in your class. What you can do about this is you can find out who's pulling your students, and you can talk to them and see if there's something that you can work out. Many times you can try to change the time or just work out a way to where that student is able to come to your class and you're able to see them and they get their education. If not, you might want to speak to your administration and work it out that way, or see if you can get a scheduling change. That way you're able to see your students and teach them what they need to know. Another thing we find ourselves saying is, please take your students to the restroom before they come to my class. This is a big issue because, as many of you already know, in class, if you have a group of students, especially younger ones, if one student raises their hand to go to the restroom, you might see 6 or 7 other hands go up, and suddenly everybody's got to go to the restroom. And if you're sending students out, they miss important things, and suddenly they come back and they're lost, and you're having to repeat things or reteach, and it just slows down the progress of teaching in your music class. So one thing you can do about this is you can speak to the classroom teachers and speak to the administration and get everybody on the same page to where you have a system where not only do the teachers take their students to the restroom before they come to class, but when the teacher gets to your door, they announce everyone's gone to the restroom, no one should have to go, and so they shouldn't ask. And what happens then is that it sets up a paradigm to when your students come into your music class, because you usually only see them once a week, everyone's gone, no one should have to go, and it's all taken care of. Of course, there are emergencies and there might be special circumstances, but if they know that they're not allowed to go to the restroom because they've already gone, it'll set things up to where you're able to utilize that full amount of time that you have to teach your students each week. Another thing we find ourselves saying and repeating in our heads is, I just want to see my students for an equal amount of time. So it might simply be that you just see some classes more than others. A way to deal with this is to first identify what the problem is and create a proposal for a solution before you go to your administration or others about this, and that way it'll create the opportunity for you to present a solution to your administration and have it to where they don't have to figure it out for you. Many times if you come with a solution, they'll say, oh yeah, that looks like it'll work, and send you on your way and the problem will be solved. Another thing we find ourselves repeating and saying in our heads is, please don't bring me an out-of-control class. Many times we receive a class, comes to our door, and the students are talking, they're out of line. Sometimes we've got kids running up and down the hall. And this is a difficult one because many times that might just be that the students have behavioral difficulties that even their classroom teacher doesn't know how to handle. What we can do in this situation is talk to the classroom teacher, let them know that it's difficult to get their class under control when they receive them, and work out a solution with that teacher that maybe they get there earlier, or they start cleaning up and lining up earlier so that the students have time to calm down. But if that doesn't work, what you can do is talk to your administration and see if you can get a principal or an AP or maybe a respected or feared individual around your school to stand by as that particular class shows up. That way it kind of sets the tone where the students know that they have to behave. Of course, unless of course you are that individual yourself, then you just do what you do. The last thing that we may find ourselves saying in our heads is, how am I supposed to manage X amount of students? This stems from simply overscheduling. You have more students than is really manageable for you to teach in a class. If you have an overpopulated class, sometimes teachers have like a class and a half or 2.5 classes. It's very difficult to deal with, but what you can do is you can find out what the rules, what the regulations and laws are in your district with teacher to student ratio. It's always important to educate yourself on the particular issue, and then from there you can start trying to find some solutions. If you can't work out a solution with your administration or with the schedule, and you can't change that, it may just be important for you to talk to somebody to help find out a solution. And if even that doesn't work, it might just be that the particular number of students at your school is so great that you end up with really large classes. Now, it's a long shot, but something you can do is request to have another part-time teacher work at your school and help take some of that load off. And that presents its own unique circumstances to work with, but it is a solution that can lower your class size, even though budget might not allow, even though certain regulations might not be in place for that. It's something that's worth asking for. So as you can see with each of these different things that we find ourselves saying, there's a certain sequence of things that we can do to find a solution. The first thing that we have to do is identify the specific problem. If we find out what's wrong, we can create a solution for that, and many times just taking the time to think about it and suggest a solution can solve a problem. Another thing that we can do is to educate ourselves on how things are supposed to be. We can ask other teachers, we can read our contract. If we have union representation, we can speak to them. I know everyone doesn't, but it's definitely an option, and if you have it, you should definitely use it and find out what or how things should be. Another thing we can do is create and propose solutions. Like I said earlier, many times just saying, hey, can we try this, can solve a problem for you. When you do that, you always want to address the situation diplomatically, because it's not good to step on toes or to be overly forceful with the position. It's good to work things out in a diplomatic way. That way resentments aren't caused within your particular school structure. It's also important to be open to feedback. Many times your administration or other classroom teachers would love to help you, but there just isn't a viable solution for what's happening at the time. And so you can be open to feedback or alternatives that may themselves solve the problem or at least make things better for you. After that, you can be prepared to either accept the way things are if it's a situation that can't really be changed and you find you can manage, or if not, go to a higher level to make sure that the things that should be are actually being taken care of, and the things that you should have or the regulations and boundaries that should be in place are being honored. Again, I'm Cameron from elementarygroovetracks.com. If you like the content I'm producing, you can go to my website, www.elementarygroovetracks.com, and join my mailing list. I'll send you a free premium Groove Track, and you'll get all the free content I produce each week sent straight to your inbox. Thanks for watching, and I hope these tips help.